Beneath the idyllic facade of Ohio's quaint small towns lies a chilling darkness, whispered secrets of pure evil lurking beneath the surface. These seemingly peaceful communities harbor tales of unspeakable horrors and unsolved mysteries that will send shivers down your spine. Prepare to uncover the unsettling truth about these disturbing towns and the sinister events that haunt their history.
Orphanage. There's this place called the Gore Orphanage in Vermilion? I'm not from Ohio, I don't know. Vermilion, and it's got a spooky reputation that's been hanging around for ages. Picture this, back in the early 1900s, a gnarly house fire burnt down this building, and it's game over for everyone inside. Now, the story goes that the ghosts of these poor souls are still lurking around, both in the building and in the woods nearby. People who've dared to venture there have reported some wild stuff, like laughter and cries echoing place. But here's where it gets even crazier. It was a satanic cult spot where they did some messed up rituals, while others think it's just a messed up orphanage with no supernatural vibes. Now, I gotta say that there's no hard evidence to back up these claims, but the legend lives on, my friends. Ghost hunters and paranormal buffs keep rolling in, even though it's a no-go zone because it's technically private property. So, you know, spooky stuff happens in Ohio too. At number 9, the Spring Grove Cemetery. Cemeteries are like a magnet for spooky stuff, and the Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio is no exception. It's like the second biggest cemetery in the whole US of A, which is like prime real estate for ghostly shenanigans. One story that stands out is about this dude named C.C. Brewer, who was like an optometrist. Before he kicked the bucket, however, he was all, yo, take my eyes out and stick them on my gravestone. But relax, because they're not real eyes, just some glass ones. But people swear those fake eyes follow them around like a creepy optical illusion. And then there's this caretaker who was all alone one night and something tugged at his pants. The dude freaked out and bolted and came back later thinking he'd find like a snake or something, but nope, just graves. If you're enjoying the video so far, you could support the channel by subscribing to Most Amazing and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Lima Tuberculosis Hospital. This place opened its doors back in 1911, dealing with the gruesome tuberculosis cases of the time. In the 60s, they slapped the name Ottawa Valley Hospital on it, but it didn't stick around for long, because it shut down in the 70s. Now picture this, it's a hospital that's been abandoned for over 5 decades. It's like a real-life horror movie set, crumbling and sinister. But the real kicker is that people claim some of the patients who met their unfortunate end at this hospital might still be lurking around. Yep, you heard me right. Ghost hunters eager to get a scare have snuck in and swear they've seen spirits roaming the haunted hallways. Trespassing here is a big no-no though, so don't go thinking about your own ghost hunting adventure there, unless you're a rule breaker. But hey, as long as the place is still standing, it's hands down one of Ohio's most bone-chilling haunts. At number 7 is the Hook Man. This spine-tingling Ohio legend in the village of New Richmond. He's a ghastly figure with a hook for a hand. Yeah, the classic hook-handed ghost story, but Ohio's got its own twist on it. There's this doctor and his wife living on Pond Run Road. They had a mentally disturbed son locked up in the basement most of the time, and one stormy night, lightning strikes their house, turning it into an inferno. When the authorities show up, their parents are toast, but no sign of the boy. Just a severed hand chained to the wall. Creepy, right? Now the boy grows up lurking the woods, stealing from nearby homes. Couples end up unalived, and folks think it's the Hook Man's doing. Classic stuff, like a couple making out in the car, hearing a weird noise, and the guy decides to investigate, but bam! Hooked to the cranium. At number 6, the Coin Mansfield incident. So picture this, it's 1973 in Mansfield, Ohio, and you've got these 4 National Guard dudes just chilling in a helicopter doing their thing. But then, out of nowhere, bam, they spot this massive metallic frisbee looking thing up in the sky. I mean, UFO alert. These guys aren't your average UFO spotters though. They're trained military pilots, so they know their stuff. And guess what? This mysterious disc isn't just hanging out. It starts creeping towards them. Panic mode activated. They dodge and weave, but the UFO just won't quit. It's like playing tag with an ET, but way less fun. They report the whole shebang, and even the military and the FAA think it's legit. Radar data and ground witnesses back up their story too. But here's the kicker. Nobody can explain what the heck that thing was. UFO or not, it's a spine-tingling story that still haunts Ohio's history.
We're gonna start the list with Waynesville, Ohio. This is said to be one of the most haunted towns in the state, which is saying a lot for Ohio. Waynesville, Ohio was founded way back in 1797, and it has quite the history and its fair share of spooky stories. So sure, folks flock here for the antiques and the annual sauerkraut festival, but it's also known as a haunt for ghost hunters. You'll hear some odd sounds in the old buildings. You'll see shadowy figures peeking out of windows. With more than 15 spots rumored to be haunted, Waynesville has no shortage of creepy tales, like the Hamel House Inn, for example. Staff here have reported seeing a mysterious man in room 4, and some say a young salesman vanished there ages ago, possibly meeting a dark end. Then there's the Stetson House, where Louisa Stetson, lyric, supposedly still roams, dressed to the nines in old-fashioned gear. There's also the former Friends boarding home, now a museum, where you might hear the sounds of ladies bustling about as if they're cooking up a storm, even though there's no kitchen anymore. Now we move on to Mansfield, Ohio. This place isn't just said to be haunted by, lame ghosts who will just pass right through your body if they ever try to punch you. It's also haunted by a big, scary, hairy, orange-eyed beast referred to as Orange Eyes, and you wouldn't want to get punched by Orange Eyes. But let's start with the haunted stuff. One of the most famous haunted locations in Mansfield is the Ohio State Reformatory, known for its imposing architecture and eerie atmosphere. Once a prison, the reformatory is said to be haunted by the spirits of former inmates who suffered under harsh conditions. Visitors have reported strange noises, apparitions, and unsettling feelings while exploring it. And aside from the reformatory, Mansfield is also home to, again, tales of a cryptid known as the Orange Eyes, described as a creature with glowing orange eyes and a menacing presence. Sightings of the Orange Eyes have been reported in the wooded areas surrounding the city. Some believe it to be a Bigfoot-like creature. Others think it could be paranormal in some way. Some even believe it to be extraterrestrial in origin. Next up, we have Boston Mills, aka Helltown. This is kind of like the Chernobyl of Ohio. So Helltown, Ohio, within the boundaries of Boston Township, is full, and I do mean full, of eerie legends and ghost stories. It was once a thriving community known as Boston Mills, but this area faced an abrupt evacuation in the early 70s at the hands of the US government, purportedly to establish the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Now the empty homes, the abandoned buildings and desolate streets that are left behind have this eerie vibe about them. You see, some locals insist that the evacuation wasn't solely because of the government's land claim. There are stories about much darker reasons. Apparently there was toxic contamination, with contaminants seeping into the soil. There are also stories about mutated animals and even people lingering around in the old abandoned homes. Not only that, but after the evacuation happened, there are said to have been satanic rituals carried out in the abandoned town. So, lots going on. Next up, we have Athens, Ohio, which has multiple haunted spots. There's a haunted abandoned asylum, a haunted cemetery, even the university is haunted. And there's more cemeteries which are also all haunted. Every place in this town has ghosts. Half the population who lives here aren't even alive. Now, the haunted reputation mostly comes from its history with the former Athens Lunatic Asylum, now known as the Ridges, which is actually part of Ohio University's campus. The asylum's grounds still have old cemeteries where former patients were buried. One of the creepiest stories about the asylum is the story of Margaret Schilling. She was a former resident who died in the attic in 1979, and she was left there for so long that her decomposing body left a stain on the floor that remains to this very day. Wilson Hall, a dorm on Ohio University's campus, is rumored to be built on top of an old cemetery. The 4th floor of Wilson Hall is said to be haunted, with reports of apparitions, strange noises, and slamming doors. There's also a rumor about a student who took their own life in one of the rooms there. In addition to the Ridges and Wilson Hall, several cemeteries in the Athens area are rumored to be haunted, including Sims, Haynes, Hanning, Cuckler, Higgins, Zion, Hunter, Slaughter, quite the name for a cemetery, Cutler, Mansfield, and Peach Ridge Cemetery. Some say these cemeteries are actually arranged in the shape of a pentagram, with Wilson Hall right at the center. Next, we have Kirtland, Ohio, which doesn't have much of a reputation of being haunted itself. What it does have, though, is a reputation for mutated creatures that are said to stalk the forests. Creatures known as melonheads. Deep within its dense forests are tales of the mysterious and eerie creatures known as the melonheads. According to local lore, the melonheads are said to be humanoid beings with these abnormally large, bulbous, hairless heads, resembling melons. I picture them kind of looking a bit like Hey Arnold, which would be a lot less cute in real life. These elusive creatures are rumored to lurk in the shadows of the forests, emerging only under cover of darkness to stalk unsuspecting travelers. Now, there are a few different versions of the melonhead's tale, but the most well-known story or explanation for these creatures was that a mad doctor was conducting unethical experiments on a bunch of orphans. Experiments which caused their bulbous craniums to take shape. At one point, the orphans got fed up with being experimented on, and they hated their melon bulbous dumb heads, and they banded together, killing the mad scientist before setting his home on fire and running off into the woods. Sightings and encounters of melonheads, though, continue to be reported to this day.
At number 5, the Franklin Castle in Cleveland is a doozy. This place, built in the 1800s, screams Victorian elegance, but beneath that gentle facade lies a sinister tale that sends shivers down your spine. Haynes Tiedemann, the OG owner, had this castle built for his family, but tragedy lurked within its walls. One night, his family fell victim to infectious diseases and other mysterious causes, and eventually the parents followed suit. After the Tiedemans, another family moved in, and guess what? They kicked the bucket too, right there in the castle. Some even suspect foul play, like a real-life Agatha Christie novel. And let's not forget the secret rooms and hidden passageways. People think that those might have been used to stash bodies. So if you ever find yourself in the Franklin Castle, keep an eye out for ghostly apparitions lurking in the hallways. At number 4 is Helltown, Ohio. Forget about the name. Boston Mills was once a charming spot in the 1950s and 60s, but in the 70s, it got hit by a shocker. See, President Gerald Ford suddenly tells everyone, pack up and leave. Why? Because the US government had plans for a national park on the same land. But here's the twist, they never bulldozed the place, and the park never saw the light of day. So what gives? People started to speculate. Did they find something spooky? Some swear the town's church got into some satanic business, while others are convinced that a rusty old school bus by the main road is a ghostly hotspot. And brace yourselves for the weirdest part of all, rumors of mutilated citizens dwelling in the village. The truth is that it's locked away, buried in the mysterious history of Helltown. At number 3 is Beavers Creek State Park, Ohio, which is more than just a nature's haven. It's a hub spot of scary tales that keep residents up at night. One haunting centers around a woman who met a watery demise in the creek. Her body never recovered. Now her ghost roams the park, forever searching for her vanished kin. Eerie encounters don't stop there though. Historic structures like Gadsden's Mill and the log cabins have their own ghostly stories. Visitors have felt those hair-raising chills and the sensation of being watched, especially after sundown. And if that's not enough, there's the infamous headless motorcyclist. The legend has it that a biker lost his head in a gruesome crash along the park's road. Now his phantom cruises the park on a never-ending quest for his lost noggin. Some have claimed to spot his ghostly silhouette on a motorcycle, while others hear the distant roar of a phantom engine. Beaver Creek isn't just for nature lovers, it's a paranormal playground for the daring. At number 2 is Unalived Man's Curve in Cleveland. Back in 1969, a car full of teens smashed into a speeding 1969 Roadrunner, leaving just one survivor. But that's not even the creepiest part. At the intersection of State Routes 125 and 222, where this tragic accident happened, there have been some spine-tingling sightings. People claim they've seen a faceless hitchhiker lurking there between 120 and 140 in the dead of night. Sometimes this ghostly figure stands in the middle of the road, causing drivers to swerve dangerously. And get this, if you don't dodge him in time, witnesses say he'll phase right through your car and start chasing it down the road before disappearing into thin air. But wait, there's more. Some folks say they've spotted either an Impala or a Roadrunner cruising down along the road with no one in the driver's seat. It's one of Claremont County's most haunted spots, so if you visit, remember to keep your eyes on the road if you dare. At number 1, have you ever heard of the place called Melonheads from Ohio? It's like something straight out of a horror movie. A group of messed up, deformed folks with giant heads that look like melons. freaky, right? Legend has it that they lurk in the woods around Kirtland, just waiting to give you the creeps. But here's the kicker. These poor souls were supposedly normal people once, but some evil mad scientists messed them up real bad with cruel experiments. They managed to escape, and now they're hiding out in the woods, surviving by hunting and staying far away from society. Some stories say they're aggressive, attacking anyone who dares set foot on their territory. Others say they're more mysterious, popping in and out like ghosts in the woods. Either way, it's a chilling tale that'll make you think twice about going near those Ohio forests.
Cleveland is also said to have some creepy paranormal stuff going on, mostly from the supposedly haunted Franklin Castle, which is said to be Ohio's most haunted house. The Franklin Castle is a towering structure with a dark and mysterious past. Built in the late 19th century, Franklin Castle has long been rumored to be haunted by restless spirits. Stories of tragedy, death, and mystery surround it. Legend has it that the castle's original owner, Haynes Tideman, suffered multiple personal losses within its walls, leading to rumors of curses and supernatural stuff going on. Pretty soon after his family moved in, Tideman's mother died, his sister then died of diabetes, and over the next 3 years, more and more of his siblings died prematurely. Only 2 of the 6 actually made it to adulthood, so it's really no wonder why the place is said to have some darkness lingering in it. Over the years, visitors and residents have reported strange sounds, apparitions, and unexplained phenomena within the castle. Despite renovations and changes in ownership, one thing has always stayed the same: the paranormal activity. Next up on the list is Put-in Bay. Now, Put-in Bay, Ohio may be known for its sunny shores and summer fun, but lurking beneath the surface, there's some creepy stuff going on. From what I've read, there are 3 major haunted hotspots. First up, we have the Park Hotel. This hotel has stood since the late 1800s, and it's seen its fair share of guests come and go. Also means there's a lot of history, some of it dark. Some visitors have reported more than just creaky floorboards and old-fashioned charm. Rumor has it that the Park Hotel is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who tragically fell to her death from one of the upper floors. Guests have reported strange noises, flickering lights, and even sightings of a figure wandering the halls late at night. Next, there's the Dollar House, a Victorian mansion. Legend has it that the original owner, Valentine Dollar, was involved in some shady dealings during Prohibition, including smuggling alcohol and hiding it in secret passages throughout the house. And today, visitors claim to hear whispers and footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, as if the ghosts of Dollar's past are still lingering within the walls. Then there's the Crow's Nest, a historic home that sits on a cliff overlooking Lake Erie. This mansion was once owned by Jay Cook, a banker and financier, but there's a tragic tale of one of Cook's daughters that's left its mark on the property. The story goes that the young girl fell to her death from one of the windows, and her ghost is said to still haunt the grounds, appearing as a fleeting figure in white. Moving on to Marietta, Ohio next, a charming town that also has its fair share of ghost stories, and most of the scary stuff happens at Hotel Lafayette. This hotel was built in the late 1800s. Over the years, guests and staff reported strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena while staying there, leading many to believe that the hotel is haunted by spirits. One of the most famous ghostly residents of the Hotel Lafayette is said to be a woman named Sarah, who reportedly took her own life in one of the rooms, and guests have reported hearing disembodied cries, footsteps, and even seeing apparitions wandering the halls late at night. Others have claimed to feel an eerie presence or sudden drops in temperature, but Sarah isn't the only ghost rumored to haunt the Hotel Lafayette. Some guests have reported encountering the spirit of a young girl who plays tricks on unsuspecting visitors by moving objects or flickering lights. A real brat of a ghost. But at least she's still having fun in the afterlife, so props to her. Next up, we have another kind of Chernobyl-like Ohio small town, Cheshire. Only a handful of people still call this place home. At one time, this was a bustling town, but barely anyone lives there at this point, and that's because of the environmental hazards caused by a nearby power plant. The plant emitted a thick, sooty residue and chemical fogs that would blanket the town sporadically. Obviously, not at all safe for residents to live in that kind of condition, so many abandoned their homes and started new lives lives in other places. Eventually, the power company responsible for the pollution was compelled to just buy out the entire town. But finally, we have the abandoned town of Moonville. Love that name, Moonville. This is a ghost town with only a few traces left behind, a cemetery, some foundations, and a desolate railroad tunnel. But what sets Moonville apart are the chilling tales that surround its abandoned tunnel, stories that have been passed down for decades. One of the most famous specters haunting Moonville is that of Theodore Lawhead, the unfortunate engineer whose spirit is said to roam the tracks. Back in the 1880s, Lawhead met a tragic end when his train collided head-on with another. Now visitors report sightings of a ghostly figure with a lantern in his hand pacing along the track and disappearing into the tunnel. Then there's the story of the Brakeman, a ghost believed to be that of a young man who met his demise after a night of heavy drinking. Legend has it that he fell asleep on the tracks, never to awaken again because he was too sauced to wake up before a train ran him over. Then there's the Lavender Lady. Some say they've seen a frail elderly woman walking near the tunnel only for her to vanish into thin air, leaving behind the lingering sense of lavender. Some say she's the spirit of Mary Shea or Shay, who met her end on those very tracks. There's also the spirit known as the Bully, believed to be the restless spirit of Baldy Keaton, a Moonville resident who liked a good old fist fight. The tale goes that after a scuffle at the saloon, Baldy was found dead on the tracks. As for how he died, no one knows for sure, but now his ghost is said to loom above the tunnel, glaring at unsuspecting visitors and even pelting them with stones.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have Gore Orphanage. Legend says that in 1903, Mr. and Mrs. Sprunger founded Gore Orphanage in Vermilion, Ohio. Soon, there were over 100 boys and girls living there. Then, rumors of the orphans' mistreatment began. They say that Mrs. Sprunger would cook cows' heads and lungs and force the children to eat them or starve. Mr. Sprunger would also beat the kids with a leather strap until their bodies were covered in welts and bruises. He would also rent out the children to local farmers as slave labor. The children were only allowed to wash themselves once every 2 weeks and all had to use the same exact dirty bathwater. Their rooms were infested with rats that bit them as they slept. Eventually, the children tried to escape. Sometimes alone or sometimes in groups, they braved the dark and tried to cross the river at night, hoping to find people to look after them in the nearby town. On one cold night in December 1923, Gore Orphanage caught fire. Now to this day, nobody knows how it started. Some say a child knocked over an oil lamp. Others say Mr. Sprunger started the fire because he hated the children and wanted to collect the insurance money. The building burnt to the ground with the children trapped inside. Locals couldn't get close to the inferno to save them and had to listen to their screams as the orphanage was reduced to a charred husk. Over 100 children died that night. Legend says that you can still see their ghosts lurking in the field where the orphanage once stood. Late at night, you can hear the sounds of screaming and pleading for help. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Athens Insane Asylum. Now this building opened its doors in 1874, becoming one of Ohio's largest asylums for the mentally ill. In the beginning, things went well. It offered some of the best care to its patients. As the years went on, the owners realized that they could put some of the patients to work there, specifically on the nearby farm. The greedier they got, the more patients they took on. By the 1950s, it had become a dumping ground for anyone that a family couldn't afford or simply didn't want to look after. At 2,000 patients, it was now 3 times over its capacity, yet the number of staff remained unchanged. Patients were forcibly restrained for days at a time, left in crowded rooms meant for one person, and regularly beaten by staff. In 1993, the hospital finally closed its doors. The remaining buildings were left to Ohio University. In the years after, students would tell tales of strange figures standing in the empty wings in the former hospital. For me though, the creepy part is the report of a stain on the top floor of the building. They say it's of Margaret Skeeling, a patient who went missing in 1979. She was found 42 days later in an abandoned ward. Tests show that she died of heart failure, yet she was found naked next to her clothes folded neatly on the floor. To the horror of those who found her, the body had decomposed so badly that a stain had seeped into the actual concrete. It couldn't be scrubbed away, and they say to this day the stain can still be seen. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Melonheads. These humanoid creatures are said to be found in Lake County, Ohio. Now according to legend, the government ran a number of secret experiments on local children there. A man called Dr. Crow performed the experiments on children in an orphanage. The government hoped that they wouldn't cause as much of a stir that way because nobody would care about the children. Not my words, theirs. or potentially theirs. The results of the experiment were shocking. The children's hair began to fall out and their bodies mutated, increasing their head to a gigantic size as a result of injecting them with excess fluid. The children feared for their lives. They grouped together and overthrew the twisted doctor, murdering him one night in the orphanage. Then they set fire to the building and fled to the woods to become feral. In the years since, locals have reported seeing fully grown adults with huge heads darting through the trees. While this is already creepy by itself, they also say that the so-called melon heads are now cannibals, feeding on any person that wanders too close to the woods. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Reformatory. This is an old prison built in 1896 and designed by Levi T. Schofield. He wanted the place to inspire the inmates to experience a spiritual renewal and give up their harmful lifestyle, repent their wrongdoing. In the end though, it gained a reputation for death, after more than 200 people died there over the years. These days, people say that the building is haunted by the spirits of the dead. One such person is Helen Glatke, the wife of the prison's one-time warden. She was accidentally shot in the lung when a gun fell off a shelf. Now legend says though that she actually killed herself and the whole accident story was nothing more than a cover-up. Then there's the rumours of a prisoner setting himself on fire in his cell, an old woman roaming the grounds, and also the hole. The hole was said to be a confinement space in the basement of the prison, designed for 20 people at most. However, guards would cram it full of prisoners just to torture them. The pain and anguish suffered within the walls are said to still remain and be heard on cold dark nights. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Franklin Castle. This Victorian era building is said to be the most haunted house in Ohio, bar none. It's a bold claim, but the story seems to back it up. It was built in the 1880s by a grocer turned banker called Hans Tiedemann. Despite being rich, his life was struck by a number of tragedies. In that house, his 15-year-old daughter died, so too did his mother and 3 other children who died in infancy. His wife became so overcome with grief that she became despondent. He attempted to distract her by turning the house into a sort of castle. He built elaborate tunnels, prominent gargoyles, and a sprawling network of rooms. He stopped though when his wife also passed away. He sold the property. It changed hands a number of times over the decades, and then in the 1960s, reports of hauntings in the house began to spread. There were strange electrical surges, the sound of babies crying, and a mysterious woman in black who roamed the hallways at night. In 1975, human bones were said to be found in a closet in the house. Now since then, there have been reports of an axe murderer there, a mass shooting of Nazis in the basement, and even the hanging of one of the original daughters of the family. People may dispute some of the stories, but some people who visit agree that a lasting presence can definitely be felt at Old Franklin Castle.
Number 10. Malabar Farm. Malabar Farm was built in 1939 by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Louis Bromfield and was his home until his death in 1956. But before it was built, another family lived there in the 19th century. Celie Rose, a challenged young woman who lived there with her family, developed a romantic fixation on a neighborhood boy. When Celie's family told her to stop claiming the boy as her fiance, she mixed rat poison in their porridge. Her father and brother died, but her mother survived. At her trial, Celie couldn't understand why her parents didn't come to see her. After all, she said, the rats always came back after her daddy fed them rat poison in the barn. Afterwards, she went on and lived with her mother, whom yes, she tried to kill, but then Celie poisoned her again, and this time it worked. At age 23, Celie stood trial truly alone, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. She lived out the rest of her life in an insane asylum, and since then the house has been haunted. One visitor saw a woman dressed like Celie Rose outside the house. People have seen lights flicker, felt a phantom cat, disembodied voices are heard, and there's an overall eerie feeling on the property. Yeah, no kidding. Number 9. Beaver Creek State Park. Although this park is beautiful during the day, it has a darker side at night. A portion of the park was once part of a canal system from the early 1800s. There are 2 locks that are said to be haunted. Jake's Lock is said to be named after a former canal worker who was struck by lightning while walking across the top of the lock. He died instantly, but some claim that on certain nights, especially stormy ones, Jake returns with his ghostly lantern to continue his evening's work. work. Spooky. Nearby, Gretchen's Lock is said to be haunted by the ghost of a canal worker's daughter. Legend has it her father put her coffin inside the lock until he could load her body onto a ship headed for their homeland. But when the coffin was loaded onto a ship bound for home, the ship was lost at sea and didn't make it. Gretchen, pleading to rejoin her mother, reportedly makes an appearance at the lock every year on the anniversary of her death, which is just very sad. Number 8. The Wandle House. The Wandle House was constructed in 1916 by the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway with funds contributed by railroaders. The Brewster Railroad YMCA featured 62 dormitory rooms used by the railroad workers, a restaurant, movie theater, and bowling alley. Today, the building is home to the Historical Society and houses memorabilia from baseball team photos, class pictures from Beach City and Brewster schools, railroad memorabilia and equipment, payroll records, and military uniforms. It's filled with tons of history, so those from the past like to visit. While there, you might come across Teresa, who worked in the eatery around the 1940s and 50s. People have also reported hearing noises, seeing doorknobs turning on their own, and dark figures. And even one time, someone who was doing work in the basement of the building watched a person walk through a wall. Let me just say, I've seen a ghost walk through a wall before too, and it's creepy, so it's not something I'd like to see again. Number 7. Crybaby Bridge. Locals say if you stand on the Alliance Area Bridge at night, the sound of crying can be heard. Some say that mothers who did not want their sons or daughters during the baby boom would toss them from the bridge into the river below in the dark of the night. Others believe the cries stem from members of a cult kidnapping locals and ending their lives as part of their secret ritual. And finally, some say ghostly cries stem from a distraught mother who lost it after her daughter would not stop crying. In desperation, she tossed her over the bridge to her death, and upon realizing what she had done, the woman reportedly drove off the bridge her own life. This is all around sad and creepy, but if I heard crying noises without anyone around and on a bridge nonetheless, I would be terrified. Number 6. Old Chestnut Grove Cemetery. The story goes a woman accused of witchcraft was executed and buried at the cemetery. The townsfolk did not erect a marker, but instead built an iron fence around her grave, which was next to an old tree. An indentation next to the tree inside the fence marks her grave, and it's said that bad things will happen to those who get close to her grave. Another variation of the story says that several witches were executed and buried here, and their ghosts continue to haunt this area, which does not shock me. Not only did this happen, but on December 29, 1876, the number 5 Pacific Express was traveling over a high bridge, carrying approximately 159 passengers and crew when the bridge collapsed. It sent the train and the people on it into the ravine below, and 92 people died. Many were burned alive while trapped inside the crushed cars and are buried in a mass grave at this cemetery. Due to this, people have seen ghosts of the passengers, and unexplained voices on tape have been recorded.
Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Loveland Frogmen. This is a really weird one, guys, and I'm saying this as a guy who has done more urban legends videos than he's had hot dinners. Residents of the town of Loveland have been reporting since 1955 that amphibious men live along the river there. The first sighting occurred when a businessman claimed to have witnessed 3 bipedal quasi-reptilian entities congregating by the side of the road. The man pulled his car to the curb and watched the creatures for about 3 minutes. He described them as being 3 to 4 feet tall, covered with leathery skin and having webbed hands and feet. While they had some human-like features, he said that they had distinctly frog-like heads. Just before the creatures left, one of them seemed to wave what the witness described as a wand above its head. Like an actual magical wand. Sparks apparently came out of it. The man left, but over the years many have reported similar experiences, leaving many locals to see the Frogman as just a strange part of reality. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Grassman. You can think of this one as Ohio's version of Bigfoot. It's said to have all the same characteristics, a tall bipedal hominid that skulks around Ohio's deep woods. The Grassman gets its name from apparently building small hut-like structures or nests made out of tall grass. The first sighting occurred in 1978 when some local kids ran into their grandparents' home screaming about a hairy monster they had just seen in the gravel pit outside. When the grandparents went outside to investigate, they saw it too. They said it was covered in dark matted hair, sitting in the pit and fiddling with some trash. They later estimated it to be about 300 pounds. The family fled, but it wasn't the last time that they or many other locals saw them. When people started investigating, they found records from the 1700s of Native Americans in the area who spoke of a race of bipedal ape men. They referred to them as the wild ones of the woods and would often leave food out for them in an effort to keep the peace. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Cincinnati Music Hall. This is a classical music performance hall in Cincinnati, completed in 1878. Before construction was even finished, it was said the location was a place where the dead render the lives of the living a burden to them. How intense does that sound? When a nearby canal was being made, authorities found over 100 human skeletons that had to be removed. They buried them in the ground on which this building now stands on. More remains were placed there in 1838 when a steamboat exploded and flung bodies all over the city. They were also buried in the ground below the music hall. If that wasn't enough to creep you out, it also stands atop of an old orphan asylum and an old Civil War hospital. All of this has resulted in locals claiming it's the most haunted place in town. One night watchman felt the presence of ghosts there. He said, "They never touch me, but I always know when they are around, by an icy chill, a thrill of electricity. They never annoy me now by mere knocking, for I have gotten so used to it. So used to it that sometimes when people have really knocked at the door, I didn't open, because I thought it was only the dead that kept knocking, knocking, knocking." Well, I'm glad he can be so calm with dead people knocking at the door at night. Most of us would just nope right out of there. I know I definitely would. Moving on to number 2 now, guys, we have Lake Hope Furnace. During the Industrial Revolution, this furnace was used to process iron ore gathered from the area's sandstone bedrock. After 20 years, the furnace is shut down, but some say creepy stories still remain. They say that in order to ensure the furnace continued operating at night, watchmen were employed to tend to the furnace fires. On one fateful night, a watchman was walking along the platform with his lantern when he slipped in the darkness and fell into the bubbling ore inside the furnace. He screamed out for help, but was consumed in seconds. Now, legend says that on stormy nights, a ghostly watchman returns to make his rounds. There have been dozens of reports of a dark figure carrying a lantern walking along the top of Lake Hope Furnace. Some even say the figure continues pacing back and forth across the furnace until lightning strikes nearby, causing him to disappear until the next stormy night. And finally now, at the number 1 spot, we have the Wickerham Inn. In the 1790s, a man called Peter Wickerham moved to Adams County, Ohio and opened an inn. It was very popular and saw many coach drivers and locals stopping there to drink, eat and converse. One night though, a driver was bragging to the whole inn about how much money he was carrying. Some men in the corner of the room hatched a plan. As he headed to bed, they jumped him, brutally murdering him on the spot. When he didn't appear for checkout the next morning, an employee was sent to check on him. They returned a moment later, pale as a sheet and visibly shaken. When the others entered the room, they saw a horrible sight. The room was covered in blood, absolutely everywhere. On the floor, the blood had seeped into the floorboards, creating the bloody outline of a headless body. But, perhaps even more shockingly, there was no head. Peter Wickerham feared this would be the end of his business. He ordered everything in the room to be taken out and burnt. He also told them to scrub the floor and remove that bloody outline, but no matter how hard they tried, the outline would not fade. Around that same time, people reported seeing the ghostly outline of a headless man peering out of the upstairs window. A long time passed, and in the 1920s, the inn was renovated. In the basement, the stone floor was removed to install a new heating system. As they pulled up the old flooring, they recoiled in horror at the sight of a complete human skeleton, complete except for the skull.
Number 5. Massillon Public Library. Let me just say there's more than books in this building. Before it was a library, it was a house, and former residents Clara Baldwin Barrick and Annie Baldwin both died in the home. Clara lived in the home from 1895 to 1909, and her daughter-in-law Annie died in the home in 1931. This might explain why this place is haunted. Some visitors have heard footsteps or smelt an unfamiliar perfume. Employees get a chill with no explanation in the outreach room located in the basement of the former home. A patron once claimed to have been pushed by an apparition while in the library, and a security camera in the library caught the elevator traveling to the 3rd floor at 3 a.m. The doors opened and a bright light could be seen, and the phenomena has been caught on tape several times, and there is no explanation, and that is just like an immediate no. No. Director Sherry Brown, who has worked at the library since 1979, said she was working in her office, a former bedroom of the home, after the library closed when she thought she saw an employee walk past her office door. She yelled out but got no answer. When she investigated, she found no one. Paranormal investigators have conducted research in the library and have gotten responses from the ghosts during electronic voice phenomenon sessions, and if you thought libraries were boring, let me just say this one definitely isn't. Number 4. Lock 4 Park. An incident occurred here in 1857 which has resulted in the park being haunted. A canal worker, whom some say was the lock tender, may have been angry about the potential of work being shut down and wanted revenge. The angry worker doused his fellow workers with a container of acid or some type of caustic liquid. It said the enraged worker tossed the lid open and flung the contents on his fellow workers, dumping the remnants on himself. Legend states that no immediate deaths ensued, but rather the men suffered gruesome, slower deaths that took several days. A few men perished due to their acid-eaten skin and organs. The man responsible also died. Today, screams and moans of those who were burned by the acid supposedly can still be heard by some if they listen closely while visiting Lock 4 Park. Also, the lock tender's cabin, which is located in the park, may also be haunted by the spirit of the angry worker. Number 3. Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle is reported to be the most haunted house in Ohio. Rumors about the eerie castle began to surface after multiple deaths occurred in the Tiedemann family while living in the mansion. The home was built in 1883 by Haynes Tiedemann, a banker and co-founder of the Union Banking and Savings Company. And let me just add that the house has 4 stories and more than 20 rooms and 80 windows. Now, Haynes allegedly tore down another house on the property where 4 of his children had died. His first wife, Lucia, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s. The American businessman would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they encountered a crying girl in white on the 3rd floor. But when Miss Romano investigated, no one was there. Soon, the family started hearing haunting organ music and heavy footsteps. 2 of the older Romano children woke up one night to find something yanking the blankets off their bed, and Miss Romano once awoke to find herself screaming on her bedroom floor with an unseen presence screaming beside her. A priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did. But the hauntings didn't stop when the Romanos left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Since reports of hauntings at Franklin's Castle increased, many turned their suspicions onto its original owner. Number 2. Sister Century House Restaurant. Now a restaurant, this building has seen a lot in the past. It was built in 1870 and has been home to several businesses in historic Canal Fulton throughout the years. It currently houses a family-owned restaurant, but was most notably home to a crematorium, which was located in the basement back in the early 1900s. I mean, since this place was once filled with dead people, it's no shock that it's haunted. There have been rumors of shadow people, a poltergeist in the kitchen, ghostly ladies in the basement, the entrance to an old tunnel, and even an unusual room that makes people a bit dizzy. The food, though, seems to be great, as the restaurant has a 4.6 star rating, so if you want to see some ghosts and have a great meal, I suggest you check this place out. And coming in at number 1, the Ohio State Reformatory. The Ohio State Reformatory opened its doors on September 15, 1896 to its first 150 offenders. These prisoners were brought by train from Columbus and put immediately to work on the prison sewer system and the 25-foot stone walls surrounding the complex. The reformatory remained in full operation until December 1990, when it was closed via federal court order as a result of a prisoner's class action suit citing overcrowding and inhumane conditions. For example, in the late 1930s, a riot broke out in the East Cell Block. The guards condemned 120 rioters to share 12 solitary confinement cells for 1 week without food or water. This punishment drove many to the brink of madness and death. During its 94 years as a working prison, 154,000 inmates passed through the gates of the Ohio State Reformatory. Many died of diseases like influenza and tuberculosis, some went mad, others ended their lives, and at least one inmate lit himself on fire. Just outside the reformatory, there are 215 numbered graves. While visiting, people have reported being pushed and punched by unseen forces. Many claim to feel a chill while on the prison grounds. People have also heard cell doors slam shut and seen dark apparitions. Even the road leading to the Ohio State Reformatory seems to be haunted. Local legend suggests it's the ghost of Phoebe Wise, a notorious hermit and eccentric.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Loveland Frog. As someone who is not from Ohio, this is probably the most famous of all the Ohio urban legends I came across. The Loveland Frog is an urban legend that originated in Loveland, Ohio in the 1950s, and according to the legend, a group of local men spotted a humanoid, frog-like creature near the Little Miami River. They claimed that the creature was about 4 feet tall, had leathery skin, and webbed hands and feet. Over the years, there have been several reported sightings of the Loveland Frog, including one in 1972 by a police officer named Ray Shockey. Shockey claimed that he saw a strange creature. It's so funny that his name is Shockey and that he saw like a strange what is more shocky? You know what I mean? Shockey claimed that he saw a strange creature on the side of the road while on patrol. When he got closer, he saw that it was a creature with leathery skin and frog-like features. Shockey drew his gun and fired at the creature, but it quickly ran away and disappeared. The legend of the Loveland Frog has become a very popular topic among paranormal enthusiasts and cryptozoologists. Some believe that the creature could be an undiscovered species of amphibian or reptile, while others think it could be a hoax or a misidentification of a known animal. Regardless of its origins, the legend of the Loveland Frog has become a part of Ohio folklore, and the creature has become an iconic figure in the world of cryptozoology. In our number 9 spot today, we have Ohio State Reformatory. Also known as Mansfield Reformatory, this spooky place is a former prison located in Mansfield, Ohio. It opened in 1896 and it closed in 1990. The prison is known for its very violent history and inhumane conditions, with reports of harm, bad conditions, and overcrowding. The prison is also rumored to be haunted, with many visitors reporting strange occurrences such as cold spots, unexplained noises, and ghostly apparitions. One of the most famous ghosts said to haunt the prison is that of Helen Glatke, the wife of a former superintendent who died in a car accident outside of the prison. Her spirit is said to still wander the prison, often appearing in the chapel or the administration area. Another famous ghost is that of the ghost in the tower, believed to be the spirit of a former inmate who died in a tragic accident while working in the prison's bell tower. Visitors have reported hearing his screams and seeing his ghostly figure in the tower. The prison has been featured in several films and TV shows, including The Shawshank Redemption and Ghost Adventures, which of course only worked to further popularize its reputation as a haunted location. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Lake Hope Furnace. The Lake Hope Furnace in Ohio has a dark and haunting history that has given rise to many tales of paranormal activity. The furnace was built in the mid-19th century to process iron ore mined in the area. Many workers lost their lives due to the dangerous working conditions, and the furnace was shut down in the early 1900s. Over the years, visitors to the area have reported strange occurrences, including unexplained noises, sudden drops in temperature, and ghostly apparitions. Many believe that the spirits of the workers who died at the furnace still haunt the area. One of the most famous stories associated with the Lake Hope Furnace is that of a ghostly woman in a white dress who is said to wander the grounds. Legend has it that the woman was the wife of a worker who was killed in an accident at the furnace. She is said to be searching for her husband's lost wedding ring, which she believes is still somewhere on the property. Another ghostly tale is that of a former worker who is said to have lost his life here but was never able to leave. Visitors have reported seeing his spirit coming by the furnace in order to light it. While he carries a lantern in one hand, if anybody gets too close to him, it's said he vanishes into the darkness. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Werewolf of Defiance. The legend of the Werewolf of Defiance in Ohio dates back to the early 1900s. According to the story, a man who lived in the woods near Defiance was rumored to have transformed into a werewolf on nights of the full full moon. Local residents claimed to have heard howls and seen a large wolf-like creature lurking in the shadows. Some even reported close encounters with the creature, which was said to be larger and more ferocious than any normal wolf. Despite numerous attempts to hunt the creature, the werewolf was never caught. The legend of the Werewolf of Defiance continues to be a popular topic of discussion in the area, and many believe that the creature still roams the woods to this day. Whether the Werewolf of Defiance was a real creature or simply a product of local folklore remains a mystery. In our number 6 spot today, we have Satan's Hollow. Satan's Hollow is a drainage tunnel located in Blue Ash, Ohio, and it has been long rumored to be the site of supernatural activity. According to legend, the tunnel was once used by a group of Satanists who performed dark rituals and sacrifices within its walls. People who have ventured into the tunnel have reported seeing strange symbols and hearing ghostly whispers. Some have even claimed to have witnessed apparitions of demons and other supernatural beings. The legend of Satan's Hollow has attracted many curious visitors over the years, and some have reported strange experiences such as unexplained temperature drops and sudden feelings of unease. Despite warnings from authorities and the dangers of the tunnel itself, and the fact that the tunnel is technically private property, many continue to seek out the site in search of thrills and scares, looking for the creature behind the most haunting tale of all, the Shadow Man.
Coming in at number 10 is the Melonheads. It's said if you drive through Lake County, Ohio late at night and happen to see something that resembles a pack of people with huge heads staring at you from the tall grass, you may have stumbled across the Melonheads of Ohio. Allegedly, the government ran a number of experiments which eventually left a group of humans with heads swelled to enormous sizes. Now obviously, the government found little to do with these now deformed people, so the story goes that they got dumped off in the woods near Kirtland, Ohio, not far from Cleveland. But because every story gets retold, more paranormal theories have been proposed about the Melonheads. Some believe them to be the ghosts of young subjects who burned to death in a cabin fire. Now it's said that they were subjected to tests by a man named Dr. Crow, whose work caused their heads to inflate to their larger size. Now regardless of their origins, the Melonheads get sighted most at Windsor Road, where many high schoolers go and attempt to witness them firsthand. Now to me that sounds absolutely terrifying, and if I ever go to Ohio, I will be avoiding that area completely. Number 9. Helltown. With a name like Helltown, it's no shock that this town had terrible things happen. Founded in 1806, Boston Village's original claim to fame was its standing as the oldest village in Summit County. But in 1974, it became the unlucky victim of nationwide anxiety over the county's disappearing forest land. The land was then given to the National Park Services, and they decided it would be home to a new park. The government began buying the properties of its longtime residents, and then, of course, the government quickly fell behind on its plan to create the park, and the village sat neglected. Now the hellish aura of the area only continued to grow when they also acquired the Kredgy dump in 1985. Rangers visiting the site became ill and covered in rashes. It was soon discovered that the dump was highly polluted with toxic chemicals improperly disposed of. Also in the village there is a church, which is said to have been built by Satanists, complete with upside down crosses. There's an abandoned bus that is said to be the host of lingering ghosts, and there is the talk of mutants who were created by the chemical spill, including the monstrous snake known as the Peninsula Python. Number 8. The Butcher of Kingsbury Run. The Butcher of Kingsbury Run was an identified serial slayer who was active in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s. The deaths are characterized by the dismemberment of 13 known victims and the disposal of their remains in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run. Now most victims came from an area east of Kingsbury Run called the Roaring Third or Hobo Jungle, known for its bars, gambling, dens, brothels, and vagrants. Now many of the victims remain unidentified to this day, and despite an investigation of the deaths, which at one time was led by famed lawman Elliot Ness, then Cleveland's public safety director, the criminal responsible was never apprehended. Now recent speculation suggests that the butcher may have traveled west and was also responsible for the death of Elizabeth Short of the Black Dahlia murder case. Number 7. The Circleville Letter Writer. In the 1970s, residents of a small town of Circleville and Pickaway County started receiving personal, mysterious letters about their lives. Now, the letters were written in block style and contained vindictive, violent, and often vulgar material. School bus driver Mary Glipsy became the main target of the letters. The writer accused Mary, who was married, to having an affair with a married school superintendent, Gordon Massey. Now, the letters sent to Mary didn't stop, and they became increasingly threatening. Her husband, Ronald Glipsy, began receiving them too. Then in August 1977, Ronald died, and it was unknown whether the death was accidental or a homicide, but it was believed the letters were related to his death. The letters continued even after a suspect was placed in prison, and the letters continued to arrive in residents' mailboxes, both city officials and average citizens alike, until the late 90s. The writer was never revealed, and it remains an Ohio mystery to this day. Number 6. The Legend of Elizabeth's Grave. This infamous legend starts at Mount Union Pleasant Valley Cemetery, one of the most haunted cemeteries in Ohio. The rural cemetery is home to the chilling Elizabeth's grave. Now, there are two major stories to Elizabeth's legend. In the first, Elizabeth, overcome with grief over the death of her husband, hanged herself from a tree near the rear of the cemetery in which her husband was buried. In another variation, Elizabeth had her life ended in a similar manner by several men angry over her inheritance upon her husband's death. Now, in both legends, the story goes that Elizabeth was buried near the front of the cemetery. However, her tombstone mysteriously moves itself to the back of the cemetery near the location of her death, most often against the very tree from which she hung. When replaced, it would always wander back to the rear of the cemetery. Now, that's not all. It's rumored that Elizabeth still walks the cemetery, often seen in a white dress. A few people claim that apparitions of Elizabeth are accompanied by the apparitions of two shadowy men dressed in all black. Sometimes she's seen hanging from the tree where she lost her life, and some even say that on the anniversary of her death, blood drips from the tree in question.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Ridges. Athens Lunatic Asylum, also known as the Ridges, is a former mental institution located near Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. It has a long history of ghostly tales and supernatural occurrences. According to legend, the asylum was a site of brutal treatments and patient mistreatment, leading to the creation of restless spirits haunting the halls. There have been reports of shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and inexplicable noises, leading many to believe that the spirits of former patients still linger within the abandoned building. One of the most famous stories is that of Margaret Schilling, a patient who disappeared in 1978 and was found later dead in a hidden attic room. Her decomposing body left a stain on the floor that is said to be impossible to remove. The asylum has become a popular destination for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers, with many claiming to have had chilling experiences while exploring the abandoned institution. Despite its dark history and eerie reputation, the Athens Lunatic Asylum remains an important reminder of the past and the need for compassionate and ethical treatment of those suffering from mental illness. In our number 4 spot today, we have Eugene. This is less of a creepypasta and more of an enduring mystery, and it all starts with a John Doe story. In 1929, the body of an older male appeared on the side of the road in Ohio. No one was ever able to identify who the man was, no one knew where he came from, or really had anything to go on. The only possible clue he had on him was an address, but it just led to a vacant lot. The closest neighbor to the address was named Eugene, so they decided to call this unidentified man Eugene as well. This is where a bit of a twist comes in. Instead of burying him, they decided to keep Eugene on display as a roadside attraction. Truly wish I was making that up, because first of all, Eugene deserves better than that, but also, who wants to see a dead body as a tourist attraction? For 35 years, Eugene was put on display until he was finally laid to rest. This is what has led his tombstone to read, Eugene, found dead in 1929, buried in 1964. To this day, we still don't quite know who Eugene was, where he came from, or what his story truly was. In our number 3 spot today, we have Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek State Park in Ohio is a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts, but it is also the home to a very spooky urban legend. The park is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who drowned in the creek many years ago. According to the legend, the woman's body was never found, and her ghost now wanders the park searching for her lost family. There are also reports of strange noises and ghostly apparitions in and around the park's historic buildings, such as the Gaston's Mill and the log cabins. Some visitors have reported feeling a sense of unease or being watched while exploring the park, particularly at night. Another one of the most well-known ghost stories associated with Beaver Creek State Park is the legend of the headless motorcycle motorcyclist. According to the legend, a man lost his head in a motorcycle accident on the road that runs through the park. His ghost now rides his motorcycle through the park looking for his missing head. Some visitors claim to have seen the ghostly figure on his motorcycle, while others have reported hearing the sound of a motorcycle engine revving in the distance. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Mansfield incident. What is a good old list of legends and spooky stories without a very real UFO incident, and perhaps one of the best known UFO sightings to take place in the state of Ohio. The Mansfield helicopter incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Gore Orphanage. Gore Orphanage is an abandoned building located in Vermilion, Ohio, that has long been the subject of haunting tales and urban legends. According to legend, in the early 1900s, a fire broke out in the building, killing everyone inside. The ghosts of those lost to the fire are said to haunt the surrounding woods and the building, and visitors have reported hearing the sounds of children's laughter and cries. Some versions of the legend claim that the orphanage was actually a satanic cult site where humans were sacrificed in bizarre rituals. Others claim that the place was actually just a place where real, non-magic or demonic related horrors took place. Despite the lack of evidence to support these claims, the legend of Gore Orphanage persists and has inspired numerous ghost hunters and paranormal investigators to explore the abandoned building. However, it is important to note that the building is private property and trespassing is illegal, okay? So don't say I didn't warn ya.
Number 5. Eugene the Mummy. An African-American man in his mid to late 40s was found dead from natural charges on a road near Sabina in Ohio. He was alone and without identification, believed to be a wanderer in search of a job. Townspeople claim to have seen him walking in town the day before, appearing to be ill. The only things in his pocket were $1.40 and a slip of paper with the address 1118 Yale Avenue, Cincinnati. Upon investigation, authorities arrived at the address only to find a vacant lot. The identity of the man was still a complete mystery, so they decided that the name of a nearby neighbor, Eugene, would work for the time being, at least until they figured out who he was. This man, now named Eugene, was brought to Sabina's Littleton funeral home and embalmed. They then set the mummified man in a brick shed near a bus stop so that people could come by and identify the body. Now, the typical 30-day period of viewing passed with no luck, but pretty soon though, Eugene became a permanent resident of Sabina. He just sat there on the side of the road for years. Now, the town loved what they called their town mascot, and Eugene had a couch to rest on, was dusted and cleaned, and his clothes were changed when they got dingy. Over a period of 35 years, it is estimated that Sabina's mummy man was viewed by 1.5 million people, but he's still never been identified. Now, I'm sorry, I can't believe they were able to do that. That is sick. Number 4. Moonville Tunnel. Located deep in the woods, the Moonville Tunnel is framed by faded stone archways covered in moss. Now, the tunnel itself is long and extremely dark, and it's actually an out-of-work stretch of railroad track that leads to an old coal mining town, and of course, it's haunted. Now, the most infamous Moonville ghost story originated in 1880 when engineer Theodore Lawhead was driving a train down the dark, desolate tracks from Cincinnati to Moretta when another train unexpectedly collided with his. This was apparently a train dispatcher's mistake, and Theodore and a fireman died instantly. As early as 1895, ghost stories about a figure thought to be Theodore, holding a bright white lantern with a flowing white beard, eyes that glistened like balls of fire, and a halo of twinkling stars, would would appear and just as quickly disappear. In addition to the engineer, Moonville is supposedly haunted by a railway brakeman who looms in the tunnel, a woman who smells like lavender, and a bully named Baldy Keaton who has been known to throw rocks and tease people. Number 3. Beaver Creek State Park. This park is special because of its history of being a canal system in the 1800s, with locks that still remain in the park. One of them, called Jake's Lock, is said to be haunted by Jake, a canal worker who was struck by lightning while walking across the top. Many other legends exist within the park, including the tale of Esther Hale, known as the Bride of the Bridge. On the morning of her wedding, someone was sent to check on the groom to find that his house was empty and he was never seen again. Esther, grieving for months wondering what happened to her soon-to-be husband, was then found dead in her home. According to the book Haunted Ohio II, it's said by the locals that you can still see her dressed in white, looking for her bridegroom on the bridge over Beaver Creek. She waits there every year on August 12th, a hideous figure in tattered white satin and lace, and if she touches you, she will become young and beautiful again, but you will die. Number 2. Malabar Farm. Malabar Farm was built in 1939 by Pulitzer Prize winning author Louis Broomfield, and it was his home until his death in 1956. But before it was built, another family lived there in the 19th century. Celia Rose, who lived there, was said to be half child and half woman, according to an 1896 newspaper article. Now, she was infatuated with a boy named Guy Barry who lived in a neighboring farmhouse. They saw each other every day, but her parents told her to stay away from him. Now she didn't like that and got angry at them, so she mixed rat poison in their porridge. Her father and brother died, but her mother survived. She was found not guilty by reason of insanity and went to live with her mother. Celie then poisoned her again, and this time it worked. At age 23, Celie stood trial, truly alone, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. She lived out the rest of her life at an insane asylum, and since then the house has been haunted. One visitor saw a woman dressed like Celia Rose outside the house. People have seen lights flicker, felt a phantom cat, disembodied voices are heard, and there's an overall eerie feeling on the property. And coming in at number 1 is the Franklin Castle. The Franklin Castle is arguably the most haunted house in Ohio due to the Tideman's family's tragic past. Hans Tideman, a German immigrant and co-founder of Union Banking and Savings Co., built the home in 1881. His first wife, Louisa, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s, and he would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they'd encouraged a crying girl while on the 3rd floor. Now, they kept having a bunch of paranormal experiences, and a priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did. But the hauntings didn't stop when the Romanos left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 disturbing historical facts from Ohio that you were never taught in school. Did you know about any of these facts? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm your host, Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about urban legends and the research we conducted personally on it. We found out something interesting that will be sure to scare you guys. Click the video now to find out more. See you in the next video.